this next section, I want to talk about the changing ways of doing science, because that's not simple either as we go ahead from here, but I don't need to remind this group of that. Well, let's take a look at a couple of the details. So in this Nature editorial that came out just a few, well, July, I guess it is, came out this summer, it begins to talk information overload. And some of this information is just fascinating to me. So geneticists spent a decade getting the first complete reading of 3 billion bases as far as the human genome is concerned. They published that in 2003. Today's sequencing machines can go through that much data in a week. So we have that many data in a week as far as the new machines are concerned, and they're getting even better and better. So that's coming at us faster and faster. The astronomers doing the Sloan Digital Sky Survey mapped about a quarter of the sky since 2000, obtaining data from about 200 million objects. The Synoptic Survey Telescope that's going to be done in 2015 will have those many data in one night. Just one night. That's how many data they're going to get. So NEON is fitting within this sort of cyber infrastructure, this kind of issue that has to do with collecting data and the large amounts of data that are coming at us. Those data are going to be coming at us, and they're going to be useful only to the extent to which we have very clear concepts, we have very clear theoretical frameworks, we have very clear questions as far as what you want to be doing with those data. Otherwise, it's just useless information that's coming in. So it's going to be important for the community to sort of think through how this is all going to be feeding into these much larger questions and pushing ahead our understanding / theoretical arguments as far as the science is concerned. The other thing that's happening is this notion of multi-scale thinking, and it doesn't matter in my world right now whether it's molecules to minds or it's molecules to global climate change. The students of the future have to be able to think at multiple scales. They also have to be able to do thinking computationally. So this phrase comes from my colleague Jeanette Wing at NSF. The notion of computational thinking, that doesn't mean, as in my day, being able to write some Fortran code. It means actually absorbing the degree to which these machines will be able to accelerate the capacity to solve problems, because you can think about the problems differently. You can really think about how you think about the problems differently. And that's what computational thinking is all about, and that's what we have to bring to our students and, in fact, ourselves. The other thing that's going on is this notion of synthetic biology. It's this notion of being able to think from the molecular level and pull things together in new ways, synthetic biology. Now, that's something that's been thought about, especially at the cellular level. You have folks like Kirshner at Harvard who argue very strongly to the notion of mapping all the interactions within a cell in order to make predictions going forward as far as cell biology is concerned. But I would argue that the ecological analog of synthetic biology at the cellular level is restoration ecology at the large scale level. It is pulling these systems together once again, as a result of them having been disrupted, but even creating new kinds of ecological systems, which we've done already in our urban environments. And we're trying to understand them in our urban environments as a result of often exotic species. But they are sort of synthetic biology, and the question is the degree to which the kinds of principles that are at work at the cellular level would also be applicable at the ecosystem and even global scale level. In the next image then, it's this notion of developing modeling tools for predictive analysis. Here's an example from plant genomics now. This notion of taking multiple types of data through multiple scales of analysis in order to get these gene cross-environment interactions. That's really what they need in order to make the predictions as far as agricultural science is concerned going forward from here. So you go from a single plant on the left-hand side of this image through the plants distributed in the field, and where does NEON then, or where do those kinds of observing systems come in as far as this particular part of the science is concerned? They come in pretty deeply, as indicated in the next slide. This whole area of phenotyping is really important for many, many applications of biology in the field. So when I talk to plant scientists about the translation of their research from the laboratory out into the field, they figure they can predict the phenotype in the field from what's going on in the laboratory about 20% of the time. they can get the phenotype. And that's not nearly good enough as we go ahead in a rapidly changing world as far as agriculture is concerned. So this capacity to translate from the molecular level to the phenotype and then out into the field is where NEON can play a significant role, and in fact there are already conversations happening using the airborne observing platform to pick up what are essentially molecular signals expressed in the phenotype and fly over a field of corn and be able to identify the individual phenotypes within that field and do that from several thousand feet. I mean, that's a remarkable translation. So when I talk about the NEON facility, with all due respect, the NEON facility is not just an ecological facility as we go ahead from here. It is a big biology facility. It is a facility for biologists to begin to think about multiple scales of analysis and how those scales can be hooked together. It's a biological facility. In fact, it's a geosciences facility. It's a facility that's going to inform many different areas of science as we go ahead from here. But to be very parochial for a moment, as far as biology is concerned, it's the whole notion of thinking at really different scales of analysis. That's what NEON, that window is thrown open as far as NEON is concerned. It's really the premier example of beginning to think at other scales. And the next one then, NEON then really is a poster child for these new tools and approaches for coming to think about how we think about these scientific problems going ahead from here, which are not just the square meter problems, right? So natural history was translated into a science as a result of Clements making a technological breakthrough. If you look at the history, that's clear. And the technological breakthrough was the meter stick. It was the technological breakthrough of the late 1800s because it meant that you no longer sort of describe the field as just sort of something general with particular patterns, but Clements said, let's quantify what's going on. And the meter stick enabled him to do that. So it was a big technological breakthrough that Shelford then built on, right? Shelford built upon that and made ecology even more quantitative, especially through physiological ecology. NEON is at the end of that tradition. It's sort of at the end, but it's also at the edge of that tradition in terms of using tools to get at the science in new, exciting, and creative kinds of ways. In the next image then, Tony alluded to the data that are coming off, and these are the numbers that they gave us. 18,000 sensors, 212 terabytes of information a year. 212 terabytes of information. Now I can certainly remember my dissertation on all the computer cards that I didn't want to drop as I walked over to the computer center at the University of Michigan, right? That was the last thing I wanted to do. 212 terabytes. That's a terrific amount of information that's going to be streaming down and into this system and then out into the communities. And that's where NEON sits. And the next one then, it really is a question of the degree to which the communities are ready to absorb this. Because it is an acceleration of the kinds of ways we've been thinking about doing science, but it is going to create these collaborative environments. And the question for you folks is, are your institutions ready to do this? The question, as I'm going to get to in a moment, for NSF is, are we ready to do this as well in terms of supporting you relative to these new kinds of collaborative environments? Now, we've seen these collaborative environments coming along, but it's going to come big time with NEON as it has in the physics community, for example. And it's going to transform the disciplines. It's going to cause cultural changes. As I said to the LTER folks 3 years ago at their meeting, we're all going to be disappointed in the doctoral student that we have 3, 4, 5 years now. Some of us may already have them in our labs, who's going to be doing an analysis on oak tree distribution relative to climate change, and you go out for a hike that afternoon and he or she won't know what an oak tree is. Because the data are just streaming down, and it said oak tree, and that's how the analysis is being done. So there will be these real cultural translations that are going to happen in the same way that happened in astronomy, where students now just log on and say, here's the time that I want, here's where I want the telescope pointed, and they're never up on the mountain, they're never cold, they're never there trying to sort of steer this thing, because they don't have to be. And that's going to happen in our communities as we go ahead from here, and we're going to have to be ready for it. So now,